I spent 24 hours in Ocarina of Time VR, viewing the world through the eyes of Link, and I have to say, it was a haunting experience. Think about what the worlds of video games felt like as a kid. They were absolutely an extension of our world, and honestly, I can think of no complete world that immediately grabbed my attention the way that Ocarina of Time did. Mind you, Super Mario 64's world was captivating as well. But since everything felt connected and intertwined in Ocarina of Time, it felt like a giant expansive maze instead of separate areas connected via a hub world castle. We could go anywhere, and the journey to get there felt long. Walking from the top of Death Mountain to Lake Hylia wasn't exactly the shortest of journeys, and there was so much to see in between. We knew this land like it was our own backyard, and that's exactly what brought me to this concept. What would it be like to lock myself in this game world for 24 hours? To see the game through the eyes of Link himself? Well, thanks to Kaze Emanuar, we can actually do that. So a while ago, I picked up a Vive, and then I utilized a special build of Ocarina of Time by Kaze to see the world of Hyrule from a new perspective. Now, going into this challenge, I knew there were a few things that I wanted to do. First and foremost, locking yourself in a game world and just playing the game itself doesn't really do much. You're so distracted by the game's story itself that you don't take in what you're experiencing fully. I've been through this story multiple times. I've romped around its worlds time and time again, but I've never done it like this. So for this challenge, I only want to spend some of the time actually progressing in the story. After a set period of time, I'll actually be flipping a switch and then skipping to the absolute end of the game. Because what was important to me for this was getting a feel for the world when I don't have an objective. But I'll get into that more as the actual challenge progresses, because there's a lot to cover and a lot to experience. But before diving in, let's at least cover some of the changes that a VR setup introduces. First and foremost, you're almost always seeing the world from Link's eyes. The only time you don't are in areas with fixed backgrounds. This is because these areas are just flat images without actual depth. This includes houses and other areas similar to that. Second, unlike a completely rendered VR environment, the area around us isn't fully rendered. Games typically remove assets out of the player's field of view to keep things running smoothly. Normally in VR, you could look in any direction and see things, but given the state of this game, we'll only be focusing on the front, because turning around will just have everything unloaded. Our analog stick doesn't get influenced by our line of sight either, so unless we're looking forward while moving, we're probably going to get mixed up and confused with how we are walking. There will be a few other details too, but I'll explain them as time goes on. And with this, we're off. So starting in about 1 minute, I'm going to be going into the world of Hyrule for 24 hours in virtual reality. I'm going to start a timer on my phone. Not sure if you can really see it. It's 2:59 p.m. and as soon as this hits 3, we're diving in. 3 p.m. it has started. We are now going into VR. Oh, this is weird. So this is the title screen. As you can see, I can look around. What is that? That is a little 8. So back at the end of July, I actually had tried Ocarina of Time VR for about an hour when my HTC Vive first came in. But it was more so to set up VR in general, and I didn't get to explore much. This time was much different. Right out of the gate, I knew the first few hours of my play session will be aligned to the actual storyline for the game. So I immediately took off for the Kokiri sword and quickly realized how difficult this challenge was going to be. Navigating this world felt a lot different than the world I knew. The reference points were the same, but it took longer to get to places due to the increased challenge of navigating in first person. Even collecting the rupees to buy the Deku shield was challenging, since you'd often cut grass and not know where the rupee went. It wasn't long until I got to the Deku tree though, and my perception of this run changed. I guess going into it I was unsure what to expect, and generally I thought it'd be smooth sailing. But even simple challenges in VR can become bothersome. You really have to align your line of sight to match up with each of Link's actions. For example, if you slip off a ledge and grab the edge, your camera's flipped because Link is facing outwards. You might accidentally let go because of the sudden shift. Or when you're climbing, you have to look completely upwards to see where you're going. When you're diving in water, you have to make sure you're facing downwards the whole time to make sure you're aligned properly. The controls are a bit finicky too, since every subtle movement seems to bring about an exaggerated action. When I finally got the slingshot in the Deku tree, I learned just how difficult projectile puzzles were going to be. The aim is extremely off, and it feels like you have to aim way lower and offset to where you think the shot would actually be going. You basically have to fire tracer shots and waste pellets just to see where you're actually aiming, and you then just adjust it from there. I will say, it did feel kind of neat lighting the Deku Stick on fire and carrying it like a torch in VR. But making sure you light the torches you need with it is again a pain due to the sensitivity of the controls. After fumbling around for a bit, as I got accustomed to the controls, I then finally made it to the boss. You actually have to manually look up at Goma with C up and not the VR headset in order to start the fight. Luckily, this fight wasn't too difficult, just because Goma tends to walk right towards you, so hitting her in the eye with a slingshot isn't terrible. Hitting her on the roof absolutely is so. So you have to play a waiting game per se. With this, I cleared the first dungeon and entered Hyrule Field. And I gotta say, Hyrule Field felt massive. Walking across the field in VR was comparable to how it felt when I experienced it as a kid. It felt way bigger than it actually was, and since I didn't roll at all to get to places faster, it took longer to get across. I'd stopped rolling because the camera kind of freaks out a bit when you do it, and it causes a bright flash in the headset that begins to irritate your eyes after a while. Because I was moving across the field slower than usual, night of course set in and the stall children rose. It's actually a lot more unsettling when you can't see where the creatures are popping up around you. It makes the field feel more dangerous since your skill as a player is incredibly hindered. After making my way to the drawbridge though, I had to stop and just admire the sight. I would sit on top of this drawbridge as a kid and just stare out over Hyrule Field. And in VR, it was a surreal experience. So it's very strange kind of being up here and looking out over the field because I used to do this all the time. But actually being able to look down and see like the bridge below me, these giant chains, it's kind of neat. When I would beat the game when I was younger, I actually would come out here and just like chill out here. Especially up here, this was like a secret hideout because as a kid, when you're up here, the stall children cannot get to you. So I would spend a lot of time up here just chilling, not doing much of anything because, you know, Zelda was in many ways like a digital playground for me. Heading to Hyrule Castle was a bit interesting for me. It's actually a bit harder to determine how far away you are from the guards since you no longer have the third-person view. This only amplified the feeling of sneaking though, and made it feel way more intimate, especially at nighttime. Heading into Hyrule Castle, the guard area actually does not take place in first-person VR due to the fixed environment, so we get through this place like normal. Princess Zelda's courtyard was a place I had to stop and chill in though. It's pretty darn beautiful in VR, so I decided to take a break here and have a snack. A picnic in the courtyard, I suppose. I always really like this room. There's something about it that's super relaxing. Maybe it's like how secluded it is from the rest of the game. The fact that you have to sneak in order to talk to Zelda, and this is a dead end in terms of how far you can go. On the 3DS version of the game, you can actually see a hallway in the previous section where you're sneaking through that you can't get inside. But I don't know, I just always like this area. It's peaceful, relaxing. The music definitely helps too. What's interesting about VR is that we can actually look around during cutscenes and see things we don't normally see. Mind you, there is black letterboxing in almost every shot to give cutscenes a film-like look, but we can still look past them. It's neat that when we look in to see Ganondorf, we can actually look to our right and still see Princess Zelda beside us, despite her not being in the shot. Sometimes there's neat details hidden around, so it pays to explore. At this point in the game, I start to notice something about my experience. As an adult, very rarely do I have a day where I don't do anything. There's always something going on, whether it be work-related or just a general responsibility. As a kid though, we don't have that feeling. Oftentimes, there isn't anything being asked of us that warrants that kind of thought process. So, on my way into Kakariko Village, I found myself climbing to the top of the tower and just staring out at Death Mountain. Because what I realized was, by being isolated in this game, no access to email, my phone being in airplane mode, my day blocked off completely, etc., there was a subtle feeling of wonder that came back that I hadn't experienced in a long time. When I had started this challenge, I had my buddy Stowgee help out for the first hour. But by this point in the process, I was completely isolated. A VR headset strapped to my face, and headphones masking out the outside world. I think that's why I started to feel this way. It felt like the post-game syndrome of having a game cleared and the freedom to do absolutely what you wanted with no worry of something interrupting that feeling. It was a foreign feeling, but one I was familiar with decades ago. After spending a while on this tower, it was time to head to a place that held terrifying memories for me, the Royal Family Tomb. For those who watched my Redev video from over 4 years ago, you'll know this place terrified me, and entering this area sort of brought those chills back. Here we go. This is so terrifying. I'm waiting for him to look at me. Oh, yep, you still get frozen. Oh gosh, that's terrifying. All right, we're getting out of here. No, that's the wrong way. I'm dead. I'm dead. I'm dead. I'm dead. Go, 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 go. All right, I got the ocarina out. Oh my gosh, this is terrifying. With the Sun Song obtained, I swung it over to grab Saria's Song as well. Then I headed back to scale Death Mountain to start Dodongo's Cavern. Alright, it's currently almost 7 o'clock, closing in on the 20-hour mark. As in, we've gone through 4 hours, not 20 hours yet. My eyes are getting a little tender, slightly. I'm gonna press down a little bit, and if I need to rest somewhere, I've actually scoped out some pretty cool places to rest. Kakariko Village at night doesn't have a lot of sound, so it would be good to lay down. I actually have a little cot over there that I'm gonna be sleeping in. Dodongo's Cavern took me a bit longer than I had thought it would. I actually ended up dying a few times from misjudging situations due to how close the VR camera is. It's far easier to take damage in VR because you can't always tell what's approaching you to damage you. Beyond that, if you lose your footing and fall in lava, it takes a bit longer to get oriented so you can recover before burning to death. Utilizing the bomb flowers is a pain too, because it can be hard to tell just how far you're throwing them. I miss a lot of throws, since the camera screws with your mind and how far you anticipate the throw will be. With some careful maneuvers, we find ourselves near the end of the dungeon, waiting to fight the final boss. And honestly, I thought I was going to die at the boss for sure. For some reason, utilizing actual bombs and not bomb flowers in VR can sometimes cause your vision to be completely blocked because of the sparking fuse. This makes lining up your throw annoying, and if you miss the throw, trying to get away from the king before the fire and rolling takes place ends up being more frantic than it should. I found myself accidentally rolling to lava a few times because I misjudged how far I actually was from it. I barely managed to beat King Dodongo with only a sliver of health left, and at this point my head was throbbing a bit. So I left Death Mountain and head to Kokiri Forest. I needed to find a place to rest and shut my eyes for a bit, and honestly I couldn't have picked a better place. There was something extremely surreal about laying down on top of a roof and falling asleep under the night sky. Okay, so it's about 9 o'clock. I don't know if you can see that. And I am having kind of like a bit of a headache. So I just finished Dodongo's Cavern. I decided to come back to Kokiri Forest at night because there's no music. It's very, very relaxing. You can only hear like the water trickling. I kind of need that. I think I'm gonna lay down for a bit. Hopefully, I have like some pressure with my eyes right now. I think it's from focusing on this kind of blurry world. Got my YouTube gaming pillow. And probably gonna lay down for an hour or two. We'll see. I'm on top of the roof. It's right outside of the forest. And it's like I'm kind of like, I'm just laying on top of the roof of this house. It's kind of a neat feeling, honestly. Just gonna lay here and rest for a bit, and then we'll pick back up where we left off. Heading into this video, I definitely wanted to play off some of the experiences and thoughts that YouTuber Disrupt did when they originally made their video about spending a week in VR. That's why I chose this game after all. It's not so much about the gameplay as it is about how it sort of feels like a lucid dream. I cannot accurately describe what it feels like laying on a Kokiri roof and dozing off as the digital world before you grows more and more dim. I'm struggling to articulate it now even as I write this. I feel like there's honestly nothing I could say to capture that feeling. As I woke up from this nap, I knew I was entering the final hours of the first day before I actually went to bed for the night. And when that next day came, the second half of this experiment, things would be completely different. So it's about midnight almost, like 11:40, 11:41 or whatever. There's about 15 hours left on the clock. Obviously a part of that will be spent sleeping for real, and not so much just resting, but we are now leaving this roof. Jumping into my next play session, I left the roof in Kokiri Forest and headed straight for Zoras Domain. Navigating Zora's River in VR was a bit trippy because there's a lot of jumping mechanics and sometimes ledges appear to be higher than they actually are. I was pretty worried about the diving game upon entering Zora's Domain. Picking up items while diving is a bit tricky, given that you must be looking down the entire time. With a leap of faith, I jumped off the waterfall, which was incredibly awesome, and somehow managed to get all the rupees in my first go flawlessly. I was super surprised by this. With the silver scale, I then retrieved Ruto's letter and then made my way into Jabu Jabu's belly, and probably the worst dungeon I've experienced so far. This dungeon is a pain in VR because of how many floating enemies there are. You never know if you're about to get hit by a bubble or some other foe, and until you get the boomerang, you really have to conserve slingshot ammo, because it will be the only thing that will save you in complex situations. One of the worst things about this dungeon is the fact that when you pick up Ruto, she actually obstructs your vision and makes it so you can't see through half your screen. This makes it problematic when enemies are floating above you and you're not sure if they will strike. Once the boomerang is obtained, things get a bit easier, but there's still a few challenges. The timed room with the bubbles is a nightmare. VR makes everything you do slower, given that your viewing range for Z targeting is punched in. I died in this room because the timer would run out. Targeting the giant worm monsters is a pain too, because if they move into the ceiling, it's insanely hard to relock onto them with Z targeting, so you need to make sure you never lose your lock on, otherwise you won't get it back. And last, the mini boss in this dungeon is by far the worst thing I've done in this game yet. It feels almost impossible to outrun him, because you naturally take longer turns in VR because you only move straight at all times. Moving diagonally is a gamble because you won't know how your control stick will respond. So basically, you will never catch the guy unless you damage yourself. It got to the point where I decided to bring a fairy and let him hit me each and every time. When he bumps into you, he turns around, which allows you to Z target him and then pursue him with a boomerang. I eventually beat him, but it was awful and I felt like I cheated the boss. After this, things were generally smooth sailing. The boss of Jabu Jabu's belly didn't give me any trouble, as you can just strafe with Z targeting the entire time. Upon securing the last spiritual stone, I grabbed the Ocarina of Time from the water, which was a total pain to do, and then decided to turn in for the night. It was past 2 a.m. at this point, so I headed to Kokiri Village to find a place to sleep. Alright, so we have all 3 spiritual stones, and I am going to actually go to sleep up there. I'm exhausted. It's about, geez, what time is it? 2 in the morning? 12 hours and 55 seconds left on the challenge. I'm gonna sleep here. Leave this running overnight in VR space. This will be my view tonight, Death Mountain. So it's just a little bit after 2 a.m. laying down up here. So tomorrow I will be actually warping to an adult and beginning the second half of the challenge in kind of a unique way. I am a little exhausted and I need some sleep. I need some proper sleep. That way this headache will go away. And with that, I'll see you all tomorrow. Sleeping this time, knowing I was going to try to get as much rest as possible, was a bit different. I tried my best to rest well, but unfortunately a headset isn't exactly comfortable when coupled with headphones. You can only really lay on your back for the most part. Morning came eventually and I felt exhausted, but with only 5 or so more hours, I pressed on. So I'm sure this comes to almost no one's surprise, but trying to sleep a full night with a VR headset on is not very comfortable. Tried to get 8 hours of rest, but didn't really happen. Today, now we're actually on a completed build of Ocarina of Time. So, because when I think of VR and the capabilities it has, sometimes there's a very existential feeling with it. Like you're bound to this universe that doesn't really have much to offer. Now, obviously, in normal VR setups, you have an infinite range of things you could play, but in a completed game, in a nostalgic game where we've explored everything, it's a bit of a different feeling. And that's kind of what I wanted to accomplish. I went back to Kokiri Forest for a moment before defeating myself on the boulder that rolls around, which allowed me to return to the title screen without exiting the game. I then swapped from my new save file to the one from the end of the game. And suddenly, I was a lot taller and standing within Ganondorf's castle. I exited and moved back to Hyrule Field. And that's when the world truly became my oyster. I made sure I had 0 objectives, so I just bummed around. Epona hadn't been unlocked on the save file yet, so I took off to Lon Lon Ranch and raced Ingo. Unfortunately, you can't ride a horse in first person unless you have a weapon drawn, so I couldn't actually race Ingo in first person. Despite this, he was actually very difficult to beat. I'm not sure why it gave me so much trouble, but eventually I beat him and secured Epona. After leaving the ranch, I took off on horseback with my bow drawn to the side, and I finally got that VR horse experience I was looking for. As time slipped by, I eventually made my way to Lake Hylia and decided to go fishing. Fishing in VR felt very satisfying, and the isolation of the fishing pond during the night was relaxing. I eventually made my way underwater and just hung out. Not having any place to go or any place to be felt free. But there was a subtle hint of boredom sometimes. But because I was seeing this familiar world through VR, every place still had a unique twist to it. I went swimming in Lake Hylia for a bit and then explored the bottom of the lake with iron boots. Watching the sky change while underwater was a really cool experience. It was at this point things began to feel like my childhood again. There were some areas that I hadn't explored in so long that the sense of adventure and remembering where they were was pretty captivating. Although I knew the main storyline well, I hadn't 100% completed the game with every collectible in a long time, so I had forgotten where a lot of the secret grotto locations actually were. It was fun hammering around random trees trying to find them. This eventually led me back to Kokiri village at nighttime. I wanted to head into the most rewarding of all grottos, which was the one in the middle of the village with 2 redeads. After this, I checked out the spider house for a bit and just chilled. With my remaining playtime dwindling to 1 hour, I knew there was something I absolutely wanted to do. I wanted to spend my last hour at the very tip top of Death Mountain, sitting on the edge of a cliff, and working out. Yeah, I worked out on top of Death Mountain, and it was super satisfying in the weirdest way. The idea of being in VR, it can be relaxing too, and the view of Death Mountain from above is, I don't know, it's always been kind of cool because this is like the highest point that you can go in the game. So I thought, well, if I'm living in VR, why not try doing a workout on top of Death Mountain near the edge? So I'm gonna be working out up here for a bit, and then I will probably just relax up here and then take the headset off when it's all said and done. I don't know, just something about working out on top of a mountain is extremely relaxing. I never thought I would be doing push-ups at the top of Death Mountain though. That's a new one. After working out, there was about 20 minutes left until my freedom, but I couldn't actually make myself move from the spot. Sitting out in nature is one of my favorite things to do, so closing out my run like this was pretty special to me. Just sitting cliffside staring out beyond the mysterious beyond. I think I got like 3 minutes left, and then I'm out of here. It's so strange, like, using a phone to track time, but I'm holding it in my hand, but I'm looking at where it should be, and you don't see it. It's very strange, especially since it's kind of like a vertigo too, because I'm like, I don't want to drop my phone off this ledge, but it's not real. But my body still reacts as if it is real. And that is it. Our timer is up. Oh, it is now officially time to exit. Oh, geez. I purposely chose headphones that weren't super tight, but my ears are still sensitive. Now for this bad boy. Ugh. Oh gosh. It's weird because your eyes are like adjusted to something in front of you, but it has depth. But when you take it off, there's actual real depth. I got nothing. I'm tired. I'm really tired. I'll write my thoughts here in a bit once I have time to collect them. So now that I've had time to gather my thoughts, why do I call this a haunting experience? Because I don't think it'll be something I'll ever forget. I've always seen concepts of people trapped in game worlds, or people dedicating themselves to stay within the game. But to think that my thought process in the game was, quote, I actually need to find a place to sleep tonight that isn't noisy, is bonkers. To think that I actually worked out on top of a digital mountain, that I traveled all over when I was a kid. This whole experience felt like putting on kid glasses again, because nothing outside my VR environment affected me. There weren't any messages, emails, phone calls, etc. All distractions were gone. It was just me and the game, just like how it was when I was little. So even if the headset hurt my head after a while, even if I was physically uncomfortable at parts, it was worth it. Taking a nap on top of a house in Kokiri Forest was worth it alone. And the culmination of this whole experience will truly be something I won't ever forget. And with that, thanks for enduring that with me, and until my next video, cheers.